Lost. Good. Show your enemy what a real fight. They've taken the lead. You can
Wow,
turn this
that's
tide.
unfortunate. So I waited to play the Destiny 2 beta until it was free since I'm too poor to pre-order, but during the time I could, I was mostly in the Crucible. I'm very PvP centered, and I played so much Crucible in the first game and knew it so well that I might as well have been divorced from it and be in a custodial battle for the kids. I played every subclass extensively since the beginning, and I used every single trick to its potential to learn what worked and what didn't in an online competitive environment. So, with my experience in Destiny 1's Crucible, I feel I'm able to compare it well enough with Destiny 2's PvP and review it judging from my time in the beta. For starters, one of the biggest changes is the new weapon slot system that no one shuts up about. In a nutshell, you can carry 2 primaries instead of 1, and every single gun with the ability to one-shot like snipers and shotguns are placed in the power weapon slot, which is the new version of the heavy slot. They are unusable until you pick up power weapon, which spawns frequently in only 2 areas of the map, but can only be picked up by 1 person. And when someone does pick it up, the game tells you who did and what they're using, which is actually pretty cool, so you know what to be wary of. And goddamn, does this work so well for Crucible, because cheap one-shot kills are no longer a constant concern. It's such a clever change that I just can't help but commend Bungie on this decision. Instead of nerfing all special weapons like they did in Destiny 1, they made them strong, but implemented a design so you couldn't abuse them like you could before. You couldn't use a shotgun or a sniper as a crutch the whole match. You had to rely on your ability to land headshots with your primaries. With this, I was having actual gunfights that Destiny 1 failed to deliver us, and that was such a nice breath of fresh air. Another thing I like that they added with guns is how crosshairs are actually rather nice to use, since you can hipfire with them more effectively, and it reminds me of Halo. But one thing I will say about the gunfights is that they take longer than they did in Destiny 1. Way longer, in fact. Guns felt weaker, and it took 3 melee hits to kill a Guardian. I felt like I needed retirement funds when the large skirmish ended, and I am a huge proponent in high time to kill in shooter games. I feel it increases your enjoyment and allows for clever outplays. So why do I think it's a problem in Destiny 2? Well, because it doesn't have unique sandbox options and opportunities other games have. Let's take a look at Bungie's older game, Halo 3 as an example. Halo 3 was a game that allowed for so many things to happen in just a few seconds of a gunfight. You could strafe to throw off another player's aim while also making sure your hits landed, you could Gandhi hop as a way to make headshots more difficult to land on you, or you could crouch mid-fight so bullets just fly right above your head. And that's just on movement alone, not even taking in different weapon types, ordnance, tactical equipment, bullet travel, and environmental hazards that you had to take into account for. However, Destiny 2's fights are just see who can hold the trigger longer and more accurately. There's no real nuance to it, and there's no real 5D underwater testing like there was in Halo 3, where any decision could turn the tide. This was also an issue in Destiny 1, but with how large Guardian health is now, it only seems to accentuate the problem. Before, you could use a grenade or your super in a fight, but you can't do that as often now. I know Bungie said they'll decrease the cooldown on these so you could use them more often, but I wouldn't be surprised if it still wasn't as frequently as it was before. It also doesn't help with the fact that now abilities are more leaning to support use instead of offensive use. Hunters have a dodge that can either reload your currently equipped weapon or charge your melee. Titans can create destructible walls that you can hide behind, with a small one that reloads your weapons when you're crowded behind it, or a taller one that just blocks damage. And then you have warlocks that can create a rift that heals you and gives you an overshield if you're in it long enough, or lets your guns do more damage when you're in it. These are actually rather cool and do spice up gameplay just a bit, but take a long time to activate, so if you try to use them in a fight, you'll die before you can take advantage of it. Except the hunter dodges if you use them to hide behind a wall to avoid death. But out of these, one ability reigns supreme in the Crucible that I feel is borderline overpowered, and that is the Rift ability. Rift trivialized so many encounters or countered them completely. You could put it down on an objective or choke point, and no matter if you had the healing or damage version and you were good at landing shots, you're pretty much guaranteed to win the fight. It was either you did more damage to the other player quicker than they possibly could to you, or you could tank enough shots to kill them regardless. The healing rift also instantly started health regeneration, which is insane considering how long it takes for your health to regen now. If you're on the verge of dying and are able to hide and put down a rift in time, you could re-engage in a few seconds with full health. That is just ridiculous. Of course, you can't just stand in it and win all the things. You could still be gunned down in it, but it gives you such an advantage over other players that's genuinely unfair. A good player could actually break the game with clever rift placement. It's like a better bubble shield in my opinion. Oh, and it doesn't only affect you. Any of your teammates could benefit from it too. Not only that, The Warlock's Dawnbreak subclass has some of the best abilities I've seen ever for Crucible. It's a subclass oriented for airborne combat, and it works amazingly well since the perks for the class actually allow for viable mid-air fighting. You have perks like an inert Twilight Garrison so you can dodge in mid-air, having airborne kills reduce cooldown for all your abilities, and a perk that lets you descend from the air quickly to regain health. Not only that, the super is like the Titan Sunbreaker class in Destiny 1, except you can literally fly around the map because there's no cooldown for the mid-air dodge. You can shoot bolts that can track players. Just take my word. I know in the first game mid-air combat was total trash, but Dawnbreak is just absolutely ridiculous. And when I played the Titan and Hunter after, I couldn't help but feel underwhelmed after I played a Warlock. Their abilities and supers really don't even come close to how good Dawnbreak is. The Titan's barriers actually seem to be a hindrance to those who cast them in Crucible, since you need to be stuck behind them and not move, especially the tiny one you need to crouch behind. You can still be shot behind it. The taller one doesn't give you the reloading ability the tiny one has, but it still isn't very useful because although it blocks damage, you can't shoot through it. It's like a worse version of the bubble shield, as you can deal with it by just walking around it or throwing a grenade next to or behind it to weaken those behind the barrier. So actually, hiding behind a Titan barrier in Crucible makes you an easier target to deal with since you're standing still, and both versions don't heal you or start health regeneration. So even if you're somehow able to cast one in the middle of a gunfight, all you're really doing is just making the person shooting you take more time to kill you. They don't block enough area to be viable in PvP, and really only seem to be good in PvE. The Hunter's dodge is actually nice for a change, since it's quick enough to actually avoid damage and retreat with. And since you can choose for it to refill your ammo instantly, you can get back in the fight rather quickly if you didn't have time to reload before. It's honestly a better version of the small barrier Titans have, so you can still be mobile. However, it's still nowhere near as good as the Warlock's Rift ability. I'd take doing more or tanking more damage over being able to dodge and reload instantly while still having the ability to do a mid-air dodge. In general, other abilities for Titans and Hunters just decrease cooldown time on melees or increase the length of their supers. Other than that, the other abilities for the most part are the same as they are in Destiny 1 with slight differences or just weaker. Like how shoulder charge isn't a one-hit kill anymore, thank god. All supers besides Dawnbreak and the Titan Sentinel are basically the same. And no, the Warlock's Arc Strider subclass is not new, it's just a pole dancing version of the Arc Blade. The only way the others are different is that they're actually weaker in a way except for Nova Bomb, which is still a one-hit kill with what seems like a larger radius now. For example, Fist of Havoc has a way lower kill radius and is a roaming super, but you need to melee guys to kill them, so it's like Sunbreaker with Sun Charge minus the throwing hammers, and with how close you actually need to be to get a kill, yeah, it's pretty weak in my opinion. The Sentinel subclass suffers the same thing, except you can block and throw the shield once, or you could activate the bubble shield instead. And Gunslinger has the ability to shoot 6 times with less active time. I really wish there was more that I could say about the other subclasses and supers, but that's really it. They're so similar to their Destiny 1 versions or have such negligible changes that's not even worth spending too much time on. Even all the grenades and jumps are exactly the same for crying out loud. As a rifle Guardian abilities, I think it's very clear that Warlocks won this time around for the best Crucible class, solely on just how good the Rift ability and Dawnbreak subclass are. Let's move on to something else, something that I actually think is a good change. All Crucible matches baseline are 4v4s. I know people are complaining about it, but it's actually a fantastic change. I honestly believe complaints about special weapons in Destiny 1 would have been avoided if there were less people in a match. Think about it. The maps are relatively the same size as they are in Halo, so they're kinda small. So if you pack 12 people in these areas with fast movements and shotguns, fusion rifles, and snipers, along with crazy supers and grenades, of course it's going to be a clusterfuck. However, in a 4v4 setting, fights are more controlled, more thoughtful, and intimate. You have more concentration when you're fighting someone, because you're not worrying much or at all about being double teamed or being killed from behind because the spawns are so fucked by 12 people running around a small map. 8 people is the perfect amount for maps of these sizes, and there probably will be a game mode added for 6v6s later on for those who like those chaos-filled matches. So overall, Crucible in Destiny 2 is in an interesting state right now. And of course it's a beta, and there's things throughout this video that some of you may have thought, well, they'll fix that in the full game. Sure, there are things Bungie could change, but I doubt they'll be too big. For example, assists count towards kills now, so there's a higher emphasis on team shotting now. This is obviously to account for the higher time to kills and to artificially inflate KDs, so I doubt they'll scrap all the programming invested into that new system and return health stats as they were in Destiny 1. Beta nowadays are not tech demos, They are advertising. Bungie and Activision are showing what they feel is some of what the best the game has to offer in this beta. Things like the Rift ability may be altered slightly, but it will work exactly the same way when the game officially comes out. Think about the other betas you've played in recent years. How different were they really compared to when the full game came out? For example, Titanfall 2's multiplayer felt like how it did in the beta, adjusting stuff like player speed, damage values, and such as the community asked for. However, there were no major changes like giving a Titan a completely different weapon, or completely reworking how tactical ability worked. The Crucible in Destiny 2's beta is a good representation of how PvP will be in the final release. Sure, Bungie will add new maps, new guns, and subclasses when the game comes out. They can also adjust damage values, health, cooldown times, movement speeds, and aim assist numbers, but things like 60 FPS cannot be patched in. Completely changing how super works will not happen, nor will completely reworks on abilities or grenades. Destiny is a game with a very polarized audience, either lauding the series or condemning it, and I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible to give a realistic expectation from the game here on out, since I find no reason to lie about the game. I feel like a game should be judged from its designs and choices reasonably, and be given praise and criticism when it's deserved. And to me, Destiny 2 PvP feels like an extension of Destiny 1 so far, with very little serious changes. The new abilities like Dodge, Bearing, and Rift are entertaining, but I wonder how long the charm of those things will actually last. However, Destiny 2 has one change in its Crucible that almost makes up for it. Almost. And that is the fact that Warlocks are good again, and I welcome the new Warlock meta gladly.